has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 312, The Vegan Uncertainty Principle. We might need to change that title. Hi, kids. Hi, it's Michelle, and welcome back to Veg Your Best. Or if you're new here, welcome. You're very, very welcome. You know, a few weeks ago, we published episode 309, and it was a lot about having a plan B in your goal. Plan A, the best case scenario plan, that's the one most of us tend to come up with. And then we, because best case is not so consistent, we talked about having a plan B. And I said that one reason so many goals fall apart is that we plan only for that best case scenario. Not just goals on your vegan or plant-based journey, of course, but all the typical goals we find ourselves setting and struggling with over and over as human beings in the real world. And we have a tendency to make our excellent, idealized, super cool, we're all in it goal. And we get ready to implement it based on a day when we're going to have time, energy, the right groceries, cooperative people around us, and then that ordinary human day arrives. And the plan tends to crack, and we act as though it was the goal that's the problem, that it's the dream, the idea, the plan that's the problem, or sometimes even worse, that we are the problem. And a number of you really seemed to respond to this idea and got in touch with me. So I wanted to return to it from a slightly different angle based on some of the comments that I got from you and some of the questions you sent to me, because no matter what the goal, whether it's work or health or finances or organizing or downsizing or aging, a vegan or a plant-based practice just can't be sustainable for most of us if it only works under best case ideal conditions. Now, as you may have heard here in the past, I have a husband. I have a husband, a partner, my partner in work and life for over 43 years. And my husband is what I would generally call a best case scenario planner. Especially when it comes to time management, predicting obstacles. And for example, if Google Maps says that a drive takes 27 minutes with no traffic at all at 4 a.m. to the airport, from my point of view, I think that my husband is likely to think that 30 minutes is more than adequate at 9 a.m. in rush hour to leave house, lock doors, double check whether we have wallets and phones, find parking, take a shuttle to the terminal, and get through security. Many of you are either this person or married to this person. It seems like we don't marry each other. We're always, that person tends to marry the other person. So my husband is generally fine with all of that. Even when the plan gets, kind of hairy, gets kind of tight, he deals with it pretty well. I do not. I don't deal with it anywhere near as well. And I may or may not have had full-on stress reactions not that long ago to two different outings where there was just literally no wiggle room built into the plan whatsoever. as in many marriages, as in many partnerships. One of us is fine with sailing in breathless and sweaty at the very last minute while the flight attendant's closing the boarding door. And one of us would rather arrive early and have 45 minutes or an hour with nothing to do. Is that so wrong to be able to deal with a ladies' room that has a long line in it and still be able to make your flight? So anyway, this is personal. So anyway, I was going to use my husband in this episode as an example of one of those humans who is more comfortable with uncertainty, and myself as someone less comfortable with uncertainty, except when I started to script this out, I realized it wasn't actually true. Because when it comes to certainty, expectations, likelihood of a meal, a decent dinner, lunch, breakfast, my husband and I tend to reverse roles. Not so comfortable with that kind of uncertainty is my husband. You know, I had a cookbook. This has been a joke in the family for years. I had a cookbook by Marcella Hazan years and years ago. She's one of the great teachers of Italian cooking for English-speaking audiences. And in one of her books, there was a line about her husband, Victor. And my memory was that she had dedicated the book to Victor, the man who could face anything except a bad meal. So it took me a little while to find it, to double check whether that was a real memory or a phantom memory. But what she actually wrote was in the introduction to Marcella Cucina, that Victor could deal cheerfully with most of life's ups and downs, but not with an indifferent meal. And that's my husband. He can face almost anything but a bad dinner. So the possibility that we might arrive somewhere and find no satisfying vegan meal really bothers him. The thought of making do with, a romaine lettuce salad and fries is not even close to an acceptable plan B for him. And it doesn't, it just doesn't rise to the level of funny little anecdote from your travel adventure for him. It would actually put a cloud over the plan before we had even left if he thought that could happen. So in this sort of scenario, I am much more relaxed. And of course, I prefer a good meal. Obviously, I do not travel around hoping for, restaurants and servers who, are unhelpful or hobbling together some sort of meal with romaine lettuce and fries, or a granola bar that's been lingering at the bottom of my tote bag for weeks. But I will, I'll eat what I can, and I will find something better at the next meal, and I will ask for the sides. Maybe could be made without dairy or cheese. Anyway, so usually I can do something nutritious and that gets me through to the next meal. What I'm trying to say is neither one of us is completely, simply comfortable or uncomfortable with uncertainty. There are gradations. There are different contexts. My husband can tolerate the uncertain arrival time and commuting and plans and travel. I'm exactly the reverse, but he's not too good with an uncertain meal. So as human beings, we're not just check simple, comfortable or uncomfortable with uncertainty. I think we all have some sort of spectrum that we exist on in our uncertainty profile. Some unknowns barely bother us. And speaking of unknowns, this was kind of what I was thinking about today. There was a quite famous previous United States Secretary of Defense who was famous for saying that there are known knowns, known unknowns, and then unknown unknowns. And so all of us are tuned in more or less to these ideas. And I typically, like many of my overthinking clients, am very conscious of how many unknown unknowns there are, while others more cheerfully skip through those and decide they're going to worry about it when it happens. And so anyway, honestly, some of the comments you sent after episode 309 about having a plan B pointed at exactly this. You might be comfortable trying an unfamiliar dish, but deeply uncomfortable asking the server, a bunch of questions about what they can prepare and what the ingredients are in the preparations. One person might be willing to walk into a restaurant without studying the menu, but hate not knowing what they're going to eat at another gathering next week. One person might enjoy experimenting with foods at home, but feel very, very unsettled when relatives are responsible for feeding or being at a potluck, which honestly, my husband's idea of purgatory is potluck. And this matters because any advice, any guidance or mentoring about making a plant-based practice sustainable for any one individual is usually so general, too general, because the advice tends to be, some generic version of prepare more, become more flexible, carry a snack, don't worry so much. And any of those suggestions might help one person and completely miss the problem for another. Because there is uncertainty on a plant-based journey and on your vegan journey. There's uncertainty with everything, but there are certain things we've gotten used to, and there's certain things we haven't had as much experience with. So that uncertainty looms large. And we don't want to leave the part that really matters to you. Whether you're proud of it or not proud of it, it's okay that certain things really bother you or really matter to you. That's okay. And that's why coaching is taking that into account. We don't want to leave things to chance if we don't have to. So a sustainable vegan practice would give you just enough certainty where you really need it and enough resilience where certainty is impossible, and then also enough just self-awareness and self-knowledge to know the difference and that you can handle it. So that's what I mean by creating your own plan B that really works for you, because sometimes plan B is very logistical. A plan B that's logistical will answer questions like, what will I actually eat when the expected food is not available? Or how will I keep that situation from coming up? For my husband, that might mean, checking the menu, making reservations well in advance, doing loads of homework, calling hotels, and also not going certain places where he's doubtful he's going to be happy with the food. And that's not necessarily a weakness. It's not my particular way, but it's not really, it's not being high maintenance per se. It's just useful information about what helps him enjoy the day and stay aligned with the way he wants to eat and live, and what he's willing to put up with and what he's not willing to put up with. And sometimes plan B is also more about the emotional context of what's going on. An emotional plan B answers different questions, like, what am I going to feel about when things are disappointing? What am I going to tell myself about my capabilities, who I am, or what I'm doing when things don't go that well? Is it going to ruin something for me more than just the meal? Now, I'll tell you what my thought process when it's me, my emotional plan B backup might sound a little like, this is not a good dinner, but it's one dinner. And I can be disappointed without turning the disappointment into any kind of a crisis. I can solve the next meal without making this one prove that anything like vegan travel is impossible, or vegan restaurants aren't good, or people don't know or don't care, or certain cultures, communities, cities are hostile to vegans. I mean, who needs that? In my opinion, who needs that? Somebody else might find that all perfectly reasonable. I don't like living that way. A lot of us need to have both kinds of plan B. And sometimes we need to put a little energy into thinking about when things don't go well. And yes, we may need a protein bar in the tote bag. And we also might need to have practiced the ability to recover when that protein bar is just not enough and the restaurant is closed that we had planned on going to, or the person who promised to provide vegan food really didn't understand the assignment. That's happened more than once. And it will happen forever. And you know what? It happens in life in all kinds of issues, not just your vegan journey. The goal is not to plan for every possible thing that could happen, but I mean, that would be a full-time job. But the goal is to prepare for what is predictable and to bolster ourselves and encourage ourselves and trust ourselves to be able to handle what can't be predicted without turning it into a problem. I personally actually find that when a decent vegan meal is unavailable, or just really when what I've had is just not good at all, I actually feel that I'm better able to connect with the reasons why I don't want to eat animal products. Those reasons always get a lot more concrete for me when things don't go optimally. You know, if it's all super, you just go, okay, it's all super, and you take for granted that it's easy in whatever context. But it's not always easy, and there's a reason why it's not easy, and I think it's important to remember why it's not always easy. And I think examining how we humans in general and how we individuals in particular handle not knowing, I think that's super interesting. And also, with the awareness of how we handle not knowing, I think it can make us much, much more resilient and peaceful. And it takes a lot of the drama out of new undertakings and believing that there are other things we're capable of doing that we haven't learned yet. There's a recent book by Simone, I think that's how we say his name, Simone Stolzoff, How to Not Know. How to Not Know, the Value of Uncertainty in a World That Demands Answers. I love the title. So it's certainly not a book about veganism, but it is about our human relationship with uncertainty and our urge to get rid of uncertainty. Honestly, one of the reasons I think I've always talked to all of you about why I never thought I could be vegan was because it was the uncertainty of it. How would I know I could do it? I never believed I could move in a vegan direction. So the book is about the relationship we have with uncertainty, our urge to get rid of it, and the author, Stolzoff, makes a case that tolerating uncertainty is a skill we can strengthen. And I love that because I do think that moving in a vegan direction is a skill we develop, and it actually strengthens us in so many other contexts and aspects. But two of the author's ideas fit especially well, I think, here. And the first is the idea of a certainty anchor. A certainty anchor is something that remains really steady even when the details are changing. So as I said above, in my plant-based practice, in my vegan practice, the anchor does not have to be a perfect meal plan. It's the reason I have for doing this and for learning about it. So it might be, in your case, it might be your commitment to avoid animal products for any number of reasons. It may be your decision to make the plant-based choice, well, whenever it's pretty easy or reasonably easy. It may be, in your case, your promise that one difficult meal is not going to be a reason to abandon the direction of living the way you want to live. The anchor, that certainty anchor, is what stays true as life unfolds. And the method, the way you live your life, that's allowed to change. But your certainty anchor is what's really ultimately true for you. Your dinner can be homemade, it can be purchased, it can be a beautiful recipe, it can be, canned garbanzo beans drained and on toast. It can be the meal you pictured in a magazine, or it can be something you assembled in the back of a car in 5 minutes to feed children who were getting cranky. Flexibility in the method is fine, and it does not automatically mean there's any flexibility in your values. And the second idea is to build in order to learn. We often want answers to big questions, lifetime questions. We want the answers before we even try it at the next meal. As long as I was thinking I could never be vegan, it would be impossible for me to be vegan, it made it impossible for me to try just making a day with mostly vegan choices. We want these answers, the author says, to lifetime questions before we even try the next thing. Will I be able to do this on every vacation? Will my family ever cooperate? What if I'm in Antarctica? What if I'm at what if I'm in France in a village where everything's about cheese? Will I feel awkward? Will I know what to eat? Will I know what to say? Do I have the vocabulary? Will I be embarrassed if I'm not 100%, but I'm asking them to make changes for me? Some answers don't arrive through thinking ahead of time. They arrive through small experiments. You try the restaurant, you take the day trip, you make a simple request, you cook a simple dinner on a busy Wednesday when the kids are looking at you kind of doubtfully about what all these vegetables are going to be. You bring a backup to the restaurant, some sandwiches from leftover sandwiches because you're not too sure what they're going to have available. You notice what works, you notice what didn't, you notice what helped, and you notice what might have helped if you had thought of it. And then you just ask yourself what you learned. Maybe you needed more food, more calories, more information, more protein, a clearer request, more willingness to tolerate an imperfect result. Or more willingness to tolerate the imperfect result and not turn it into evidence that there's anything wrong with you or there's anything wrong with moving in a vegan direction. Those experiments give you data. They help you make the next plan more personal, more tailored to the things you're a little bit prickly about, to the things where you're sensitive. And that makes things so much more useful because one size does not fit all in anything, right? This is also one reason I believe so strongly in coaching. And you can coach yourself too, because it's just a method of interrogating what you've been thinking, making things out loud, which you tend to be vague about. Good coaching is the most effective support, I think, for behavior change. And it's true when someone is moving in a vegan direction, and it's true for many, many other changes and evolutions and goals, because the power of coaching is not that the coach hands everyone the same answer. In real life and online, people are always asking me for a one-size-fits-all prescription for how they go vegan or how they do any number of things. And you see it all the time on these, I've got the answer, or, people with their fingernails clicking on something to get your attention, that I have this answer for you. I want you to know that coaching is nothing like that. The power of coaching is that it helps you find the real problem in your world and come up with ideas that work for you. My husband and I could go into a coaching session with the same stated goal to travel and maintain our vegan practice, but we would not need the same coaching. He might need more dependable meal plans, food ideas, because uncertainty about food affects his enjoyment of the whole day. He might need to reframe what he makes a bad meal mean. I might need more margin around time because rushing makes it harder for me to think clearly and harder for me to be in my usual sunny mood and ask good questions and enjoy things when we get there and not feel just like completely overwhelmed. So generic advice to prepare for vegan travel would just not work, wouldn't be specific enough. for either one of us. A coach can help you notice what actually is happening at the point when your plans fall apart. Maybe you get too hungry. Maybe you dislike disappointing other people. Maybe you dislike, like me, you don't like asking tons of questions of people. That's just not, especially when I'm hungry, I don't want to have a big conversation. I really, 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 really don't. And maybe you assume that asking one question will make you difficult or turn one imperfect choice into a story that you failed again, or that you're too much trouble for your partner. I don't know. All sorts of stuff goes on. So in our thoughts, we can slow it down. Coaching can help us slow things down so we actually enjoy real life more. Because real life is not always going to work according to plan. And there is some magic in dealing with real life rather than some sort of fantasy. Once we know what's happening, we can build support for any problem instead of applying some sort of generic blah solution to what is your very specific individual life. And I think what's great about it is that practice travels throughout your life. That's why I keep saying the skills you learn through a plant-based practice, they don't stay on your plate. When you learn to ask clearly for what you need at a restaurant, you're practicing self-advocacy. That's useful everywhere. And I believe when you're asking for vegan and plant-based options, you're also advocating for a more sustainable and compassionate world. And that's always great too, to keep repositioning our consciousness towards. When you bring food instead of hoping the situation is somehow going to just work out, you're learning to support your future self and your most real values. And when a meal goes badly and you make the next aligned choice without turning the first one into some sort of problem or character judgment or assassination, you're just practicing recovery, and those skills go with you into all aspects of your life, your health, your work, your relationships, your money, your travel ideas, your creativity, every other change that asks you to go forward without complete control and complete certainty. How you go vegan really can become how you do everything, not because food is everything, but because learning to change in any area teaches you how to change effectively in others. So we're going to close this up. But before I shut down for today, for this week, I want to give you a small coaching exercise to choose one part of your vegan or plant-based practice that regularly becomes difficult. Okay, it doesn't for you. Choose some aspect in your life that regularly becomes difficult. For those of you who are on a plant-based journey, it might be weekday dinners, it might be travel, it might be restaurants or family gatherings or holidays, or late afternoon when you are tired, the kids are in their, what do they call it, the witching hour before dinner, and everyone is in a less than optimal mood. And then you get to ask yourself 4 questions. There are 4. I'm going to put them in the show notes, so you don't need to grab a pen, don't worry about it. But ask yourself, what has to go right for my current plan to work? What has to go right out in the world for my current plan to work? Does it require you to have more time, for someone else to have more time, energy, health, groceries, cooperation, a certain restaurant to be available or open, or a time of day, or a version of you who feels motivated? What is it? What is necessary? What has to go right for your current plan to work? What part of the uncertainty actually bothers you the most? What part of it? Is it maybe being a little bit hungry or disappointed? Is it the social awkwardness? Is it feeling deprived, like everybody else can just eat this and I can't? Is it having to speak up and ask, or ask twice or 3 times? Is it not knowing, if that next place that you've been planning is actually going to be a good meal? Number 3, does the problem need better logistics or more emotional resilience from you? Or does it need a little of both? You might need a sandwich. You might need to look at the menu. You might need some practice asking clearly for what you actually want and noticing where the communication skills kind of go, where what you're asking for makes sense to you, but people don't hear it. Do you need to remind yourself that, one underwhelming meal does not mean the rest of your life is going to be one of deprivation? And fourth, what stays true even when the details of the plan change? That's your certainty anchor. Your anchor might be that you are still moving in a vegan direction, that you're proud of yourself, that you can make other aligned choices at the next opportunity, and that this meal does not have to be perfect for your practice to continue, and that you do not need to be perfect for your practice to continue. You can ask yourself some or all of those questions and then just make a tiny adjustment. Test it. You don't have to settle this question once for the rest of your life. It's a process, it's a practice, and that's how a practice becomes more sustainable and easier. You don't design it for a hypothetical person who has unlimited time, motivation, and no complicated relationships. You design it for the person who's actually going to get up in the morning today and live it. So this is exactly the work I love to do in coaching. We look at where your current approach is helping and where it's creating some unnecessary strain, and what would make the next step fit your values and your actual life. There's no one correct amount of preparation or flexibility. There's not one answer. We just find out what support helps you moving in the direction you care about. Anyway, I'd love to hear all your answers to this. I'd love to hear all your problems with this, and what's one kind of uncertainty that does not bother you too much, and what kind of uncertainty makes you demand a plan or a change in plans immediately. As I mentioned above, my amazing husband can face the uncertainties of travel and time management with very few repercussions to his nervous system. And I can face an indifferent meal that tends to kind of ruin his day. It can even ruin his day if he thinks it's going to happen. So that's not to make any one of us wrong or right. He doesn't need to change, neither do I. But awareness of this tendency in each of us helps us proactively take care of ourselves, to proactively empower ourselves, enhance our experiences in this adventure that we call life. And as always, thank you for being here on this adventure with me, my veggie bestie. Take what's useful, leave what's not. Let me know anytime how I can help you or how I can tailor the podcast to your interests. And until next week, veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.